Picture this. While Europe was locked in the Dark Ages, burning witches and dying from plagues, while kings ruled with iron fists and the common person had zero say in government, something extraordinary was happening in North America. Something that would blow your mind. 5 nations constantly at war with each other were about to do the impossible. They were about to create one of the world's first true democracies. Not just a democracy, but a democracy where women held real political power, where leaders could be fired by the people, where every decision required everyone to agree. And here's what's crazy. Most Americans have no idea this even happened. This is the story of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Iroquois, the people of the Longhouse. And their story, it shaped America in ways you've never been taught in school.
Let's go back, way back. Sometime around the 1400s, maybe earlier, maybe later, historians can't agree, 5 nations controlled what we now call upstate New York. The Mohawk in the east, the Seneca in the west, and in between, the Oneida, Onondaga, and Cayuga, all speaking similar languages, all living similar lives, and all caught in a nightmare they couldn't escape. Blood revenge. Here's how it worked, and trust me, this gets dark. Your brother gets killed by someone from another nation. What do? You don't call the police. There are no police. You don't go to court. There are no courts. You grab your weapons and you kill someone from their nation. But wait, now they've lost someone. So what do? They kill someone from your nation. And on and on and on, forever. Generation after generation, village after village, family after family. Every funeral demanded revenge. Every death demanded blood. If you didn't seek revenge, you dishonored your family. You dishonored your ancestors. You were a coward. The Iroquois peoples were trapped in an endless cycle of violence, mothers burying children, children watching their fathers murdered, entire communities living in constant fear. One account describes it like this: everywhere there was peril and everywhere mourning. Men were ragged with sacrifice and women scarred. Everywhere there was misery. Imagine that, waking up every single day not knowing if today is the day someone comes for revenge. This was life. This was normal, and it seemed like nothing could stop it. But then something changed. According to Haudenosaunee oral tradition, stories passed down for hundreds of years, a man appeared. His name, Daganawada, but most people call him by a different title, the Peacemaker. Now here's where this story gets interesting. The Peacemaker, he was born a Huron, an outsider, not even part of the 5 nations he was trying to unite. And get this, he had a severe speech impediment. He could barely talk. Think about that for a second. A man with a stutter trying to convince 5 warring nations to make peace? But the Peacemaker had something nobody else had: a vision. He'd been sent by the Creator, at least that's what he believed, with a message of peace, of unity, of a completely new way of living. He had 3 core principles, 3 ideas that would change everything. First, health, peace of mind and body, because you can't think clearly when you're consumed by rage and revenge. Second, righteousness, justice and fairness between people and between nations, real equality. And third, power, not power over people,
but the power of reason, the power of good minds coming together. The Peacemaker believed that peace wasn't just possible, it was the natural order. It's what the Creator intended for all humans. But he had a problem. Nobody would listen to him. Here he was, an outsider with a speech impediment, telling these nations to stop doing what they'd done for generations, to abandon the law of blood revenge that had defined their entire way of life. They laughed at him, dismissed him, sent him away, until he found the one person who could help. The Peacemaker traveled to the territory of the Onondaga, and there he met a man named Hiawatha. Now, forget everything he learned from that Longfellow poem. That poem, pure fiction. The real Hiawatha was nothing like it. The real Hiawatha was broken. His wife, dead. His daughters, murdered. All killed by an evil Onondaga chief named Tanoharo. A man so twisted in both body and mind that legend says his hair was made of living snakes. How he was consumed with grief. He'd wandered into the forest, stringing shell beads together, looking for someone who could understand his pain. And that's when the Peacemaker found him. The Peacemaker performed a ceremony. He took strings of white shell beads, wampum, and he placed them before Hiawatha. He said, "I wipe away the tears from your eyes so you can see clearly." Another string. "I open your ears so you can hear my words of peace." Another string. "I clear your throat so you can speak again with wisdom and reason." This ceremony here, it still exists today. The Haudenosaunee still use it. It's called the condolence ceremony. And in that moment, Hiawatha's grief transformed into purpose. He joined the Peacemaker. And together, the visionary who couldn't speak clearly and the grieving man who'd found his voice again, they were about to change history.
The Peacemaker and Hiawatha had their message, but they still had to prove it. Their first stop, the Mohawk Nation, the easternmost of the 5 nations. Now, the Mohawks, they liked the idea of peace. Who wouldn't? But here's the thing. They'd heard promises before, empty words. They needed proof. So they challenged the Peacemaker. "Climb that tree," they said, pointing to a massive tree hanging over Cohoes Falls, a raging waterfall on the Mohawk River. The Peacemaker climbed. Then the Mohawk warriors took their axes and they chopped the tree down. Everyone watched as the tree, with the Peacemaker in it, crashed into the violent rapids below. The water swallowed him whole. He was dead. He had to be. Nobody could survive that. The Mohawks went home, convinced this so-called Peacemaker was just another fool with big ideas. But the next morning, they found him sitting by a campfire, cooking breakfast. The man had survived. He had gone over one of the most dangerous waterfalls in the region and lived to tell about it. The Mohawks were stunned. This wasn't just luck. This was something else. This man had power, real power. And right there, at that moment, the Mohawk Nation became the first to accept the message of peace. The impossible had begun. With the Mohawks on board, the Peacemaker and Hiawatha began their journey across Iroquois. Nation by nation, village by village, council by council. The Oneida, the people of the Standing Stone, were next. They'd heard about what happened at the falls. After 7 days of council meetings, they agreed. Then the Cayuga, the people of the Great Swamp, they joined too. The Seneca, the people of the Great Hill in the west, were divided at first. Some wanted peace, others didn't trust it. But then, something incredible happened. A solar eclipse.
The sky went dark in the middle of the day. To the Seneca, this was a sign. The Creator himself was weighing in. They joined the peace. But there was still one problem. One major problem. Haudenosaunee. Remember him? The evil Onondaga chief who'd killed Hiawatha's family? The man with snakes in his hair? The Onondaga Nation, sitting right in the middle of the 5 nations geographically, couldn't join the peace as long as Haudenosaunee controlled them. So, the Peacemaker, Hiawatha, and the other nations did something brilliant. They didn't try to kill him. They didn't wage war on him. They negotiated. The Peacemaker went to Haudenosaunee with an offer. Join us, accept the peace, and your nation, Onondaga, will be the capital. You will be the fire keepers. The eternal council fire will burn in your territory. You'll be the center of everything. And here's the thing about giving someone respect and power. It transforms them. The Peacemaker symbolically combed the snakes out of Haudenosaunee hair, cleared the evil from his mind. Haudenosaunee, the most twisted, hateful man in Iroquois, became a supporter of peace. The 5 nations were united. Now came the hard part, creating a government that would actually work. The Peacemaker didn't just want the nations to stop fighting. He wanted to create something lasting, a system of laws that would keep peace for generations. So they created the Great Law of Peace, the Iroquois. 117 articles? That's right, 117 laws covering everything from how to choose leaders to how to handle disputes to how to welcome outsiders. This wasn't some loose agreement. This was a constitution. And unlike the European monarchies of the time, this government was democratic. Here's where it gets even more revolutionary. These chiefs weren't chosen by birth. They weren't chosen by war. They weren't even chosen by other men. They were chosen by women.
Let me paint you a picture of Europe in the 1400s and 1500s. Women, they had almost no rights. They couldn't vote, couldn't own property, couldn't divorce their husbands. In many places, they were literally considered the property of men. Now, let's look at what was happening in Haudenosaunee territory at the same time. Women owned the land. Women owned the longhouses. Women owned the crops. Women controlled the food supply. And women chose the chiefs. Here's how it worked. Haudenosaunee society was matrilineal. That means you belonged to your mother's clan, not your father's, your mother's. There were different clans: wolves, bear, turtle, hawk, heron, beaver, snipe, deer, ewel. And each clan had a clan mother. Think of the clan mother as, well, she was kind of like the CEO of the family. She was the head of the Longhouse, the eldest, most respected woman in the clan. And her job? Watch the boys as they grow up. She'd observe them for years, watching how they treated others, how they handled responsibility, how they spoke, how they listened. Was this boy honest? Was he patient? Did he gossip? Did he think about the community or just himself? And when the time came to choose a new chief, when an old chief died or was removed, the clan mother would select the man she thought was best suited for the job. But wait, it gets better. If that chief didn't do his job properly, if he acted selfishly, if he stopped listening to the people, the clan mother would warn him once.
If he didn't change, she'd warn him twice. If he still didn't change, the clan mother would literally take away the deer antler headdress that was his symbol of authority, and he was out, fired, done. The clan mother would then choose someone else. There were 49 clan mothers total across the 5 nations, and they held real power. Not symbolic power, not ceremonial power, actual political power. The chiefs couldn't make decisions without considering what the women representing their clan thought about it. Now, here's a question for you. Why don't we learn about this in school? Why isn't this part of the story we tell about democracy and women's rights? Because here's what's wild. When the suffragettes in America were fighting for women's right to vote in the 1800s, fighting against men who said women were too emotional or irrational to participate in government, some of them knew about the Haudenosaunee. They'd seen a society where women and men shared power, where women's voices mattered in political decisions. It gave them hope. It gave them a model to point to. But we've buried that history. We've forgotten it. Well, today, we're bringing it back.
So, what was daily life actually like in a Haudenosaunee village? Let's step inside a longhouse. Imagine a building 80 to 100 feet long, 20 feet wide, made from elm bark stretched over a wooden frame, shaped like a loaf of bread, rounded on top. One longhouse could hold up to 60 people, sometimes more. Now, picture walking through the door. You're hit with the smell of wood smoke. Fires burn every 20 feet down the center corridor, creating cooking areas. Above each fire, platforms run along both walls, one low for sleeping and sitting, one high for storage. Corn hangs from the ceiling, dried squash, herbs, furs, everything the family needs. And who lives here? Your grandmother, your mother, your aunts, your sisters, your cousins, all the women of your clan, and their husbands and children. See, here's how Haudenosaunee marriage worked. When a man got married, he moved into his wife's longhouse, not the other way around. The longhouse belonged to her family, her clan. But the man didn't change clans. He was still part of his mother's clan. His loyalty, his deepest loyalty, was still to his mother's family. And when he had children, those children belonged to their mother's clan. This created an incredibly strong family structure. Children grew up surrounded by family, by multiple mothers, because they called all their mother sisters mother too. Multiple fathers, multiple siblings who were actually cousins. Nobody was alone. Nobody was isolated. If something happened to your parents, your aunts and uncles raised you. If you needed food, the whole clan provided it. It was a safety net built right into the culture. Outside the village, you'd see fields, acres and acres of crops. And what they grew, it's become legendary. The 3 sisters: corn, beans, and squash. Now, here's why this is brilliant. Corn grows tall, beans climb the corn stalks like a natural trellis, and squash spreads along the ground, covering the soil, keeping it moist, preventing weeds. They help each other grow. They make the soil better, not worse. And nutritionally, together, they provide almost everything a human body needs. Carbohydrates from the corn, protein from the beans, vitamins and minerals from the squash. The Haudenosaunee believed these crops were gifts from the Creator, sacred, the first 3 foods given to the people. Women tended these fields, women controlled the harvest, women decided how food was distributed.
And let me tell you, when women control the food supply, they control a lot. If the chiefs were planning a war the women didn't approve of, the women could simply refuse to provide food for the war party. No food, no war. It's that simple. This was a society where men and women had different roles, but equal power.
The Haudenosaunee didn't have a written language. No paper, no books. So how did they preserve their laws, their history, their agreements? Through wampum. Wampum beads are made from shells, specifically quahog clam shells and whelk shells from the Atlantic coast. The shells are broken into small pieces, then drilled, then polished, then strung together or woven into belts. White beads and purple beads arranged in patterns. And these patterns, they're not just decoration. They're memory, they're history, they're law. The most famous of all wampum belts, the Hiawatha belt. Picture a belt with 5 symbols joined together. On the far left, a square. That's the Mohawk Nation, the eastern doorkeeper. Next, another square, the Oneida Nation. In the center, a tree, the great white pine. That's the Onondaga, the firekeepers, right in the middle where the eternal council fire burns. Then, another square, the Cayuga Nation, and on the far right, the final square, the Seneca Nation, the western doorkeeper. All 5 symbols connected by white wampum, united, together. When the Grand Council meets, this belt is there. It's placed before the chiefs to remind them, we are one. We are united under the great law of peace. But there's another symbol that's even more powerful, the tree of peace. When the 5 nations first came together, the Peacemaker uprooted a great white pine tree, the tallest, strongest tree in the forest. He told the chiefs to throw their weapons into the hole. War clubs, tomahawks, spears, all the weapons of war. Then he replanted the tree on top of them, buried them forever. We have buried the hatchet, he said. That phrase, it comes from this moment right here. At the top of the tree, the Peacemaker placed an eagle. Why an eagle? Because eagles can see far. They can spot danger from miles away. The eagle's job, watch over the Haudenosaunee. If danger approaches, if anyone threatens the peace, the eagle will warn the people. And the roots of the tree, they spread in 4 directions, north, south, east, and west. The Peacemaker said that any nation, anyone who wanted to follow the great law of peace, could trace those roots back to the tree and find shelter beneath it. The door was open. The peace was available to everyone who wanted it. In 1722, a 6th nation, the Tuscarora, fleeing violence in the south, came north and asked to join. The Haudenosaunee welcomed them. The 5 nations became the 6 nations. The Great Law, still flexible enough to grow.
Now we jump forward to the 1700s, the American colonies, 13 separate governments, barely cooperating with each other, constantly arguing. And the French, they're pushing in from Canada, building forts, making alliances with native nations. The British are getting nervous. So in 1754, they call a meeting, the Albany Congress. Representatives from 7 colonies gather in Albany, New York. And guess who else is there? The Haudenosaunee, 150 Iroquois representatives, including a Mohawk leader named Hendrick. Now, here's what you need to understand. The colonies in the Haudenosaunee had been allies for decades, trading partners, military allies. The Haudenosaunee knew the colonists well, and they'd been telling them the same thing for years. You need to unite. You're 13 separate colonies acting like 13 separate nations. You're weak. If you don't come together, the French will destroy you. At the Albany Congress, this message hit home. Enter Benjamin Franklin. Franklin, printer, inventor, politician, had been thinking about colonial union for a while, and in 1751, he'd written something fascinating in a letter. It would be a strange thing if 6 nations of ignorant savages should be capable of forming a union that has lasted for ages, and yet a dozen English colonies can't do the same. Now, let's be clear. Franklin's language was terrible. Ignorant savages, that's pure racism and arrogance. But notice what he's admitting. The Haudenosaunee have something that works, a union that's lasted, a system of government that's stable. At the Albany Congress, Franklin proposed the Albany Plan of Union, a proposal to unite the colonies under a central government. And here's the thing, parts of that plan look very familiar if you know the Haudenosaunee system. A Grand Council? Check. Representatives from each colony? Check. Decisions made by consensus when possible? Check. The Albany Plan was rejected. The colonies weren't ready. They were too protective of their individual power. But the idea stuck. Fast forward to 1776, the Declaration of Independence. Fast forward to 1787, the Constitutional Convention. Were the founders directly copying the Great Law of Peace? No. The U.S. Constitution is its own thing, with its own influences. British law, Enlightenment philosophy, Greek and Roman ideas. But did the Haudenosaunee Confederacy show the founders that it was possible for separate nations to unite under one government while still maintaining individual sovereignty? Absolutely. Did it show them that democracy could work on a large scale? Without question. In 1987, 200 years after the Constitution was written, the U.S. Senate passed a resolution, a formal acknowledgement. It said that the Haudenosaunee Confederacy contributed to the development of the United States government and influenced the framers of the Constitution. It took that long for America to officially recognize what the founders had learned from the people who were here first. So where are the Haudenosaunee today? They're still here, still strong, still governed by the Great Law of Peace. The Grand Council still meets. The 50 chiefs still gather. The clan mothers still hold their power. This isn't ancient history we're talking about. This is a living government, a living culture. Today, Haudenosaunee communities exist across upstate New York and Ontario, Canada. 6 nations of the Grand River, Onondaga Nation, Mohawk territories at Akwesasne and Kanawake. And they're fighting, still fighting, for their rights, for their land, for their sovereignty. In 2024, the Great Law of Peace was recognized as a finalist for the World Future Policy Award, an international recognition of political systems that create lasting peace and justice. Think about that. A system of government created hundreds of years ago, still relevant today. Still teaching the world about democracy, about balance, about unity. The Haudenosaunee taught us that democracy doesn't require writing, that unity doesn't mean sameness, that women's voices are essential to good government. They taught us that consensus, though slower, though harder, creates stronger, longer-lasting agreements than simple majority rule. They taught us that peace is possible, even between former enemies. But here's what bothers me. Why don't more people know this story? Why isn't this taught in every American history class? Why isn't this part of the basic narrative we tell ourselves about democracy?
Because it complicates the story we like to tell ourselves. The story where civilization came from Europe to America. But the truth? The truth is messier, more complicated, and way more interesting. Civilization was already here. Democracy was already here. Women's political power was already here. And the people who created it, they're still here. The Haudenosaunee Confederacy is one of the oldest continuously functioning governments on Earth. Let that sink in. Older than the United States. Older than most European governments. Still operating under the same basic principles that the Peacemaker laid down hundreds of years ago. So the next time someone talks about the birth of democracy in America, the next time you hear about the founding fathers inventing a new form of government, remember the Haudenosaunee. Remember the Peacemaker and Hiawatha. Remember the clan mothers who held and still hold real political power. Remember the Tree of Peace, with roots extending in all four directions, welcoming anyone who seeks shelter. Because this is American history too, and it's time we all learned it.
The Haudenosaunee story? That's just one in 17,000 years of American history. Here at Chronamer, we don't start at 1776. We go all the way back. Mammoth hunters, ancient pueblos, mound builders, the real complete story of America. From Clovis spear points to the Constitution. From mastodon kills to moon landings. From the first Americans to the founding fathers. Evidence-based. Archaeological facts. No speculation. If you want the full story, the history they didn't teach you in school, hit that subscribe button right now. Because America's story, it didn't start when you think it did.